In this video, we are going to talk about gut health. What is it and why it is so important? And if you stick to the end, we'll give you 3 tips on what you can do starting today to improve the health of your gut. Hi, my name is Sandrina, co-host of A12 Wellness, your guiding start to healing, where we talk all things health and wellness, helping women reclaim their health. I'm accompanied today with Laura, also co-host. How are you, Laura?
I'm great. How are you?
Very well. So, Laura, gut health, all the rave right now. Um, there have been studies all along for many years, but it's really coming out to the surface now. What exactly is gut health and why is it such a big deal?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question, and I'm so thrilled that it's actually becoming more sort of front and center, right, on that main stage, because it is so incredibly important to our overall health. If you think about it, our gut, right, which really begins at our mouth and it goes all the way through and ends at our anus, is the epicenter of our health because it is a really big way that ourselves, our bodies, and our minds interface with the outside world. And that is by the foods that we eat. And so when we understand that anything and everything that we might be taking in is going to affect this gut, which is comprised of its own microbiome, it has its own sort of like planetary ecosystem, right? We have a skin microbiome, we have a brain microbiome, we have microbiomes that exist right within our entire body, right? And although they may seem separate, they're all connected. But the gut microbiome is so incredibly powerful and important because it's sort of like an organ in and of itself. Because it really, the health of this microbiome, think about a microbiome as these microorganisms that are comprised of mostly bacteria, some fungi, some yeasts, and they, in a perfect world or in a perfectly, in a healthy person, certainly nothing perfect, right? But in a healthy person, this microbiome is diverse. And it has a robust amount of these, what we call commensal or keystone bacteria that help us optimize our functioning. So they're living organisms that have their own genetic profile. There's actually more of their genetic profile in us than our own, believe it or not. It gets wild when we start to put our head around it. But we house them and we feed them, and they in turn give us these beautiful compounds and sort of metabolites, if you will, from their processing to help our optimal functioning. So that's neurotransmitters sort of for our mood and our motility of our gut. It's vitamins such as B vitamins, vitamin K, biotin, all of these vitamins that we need to really help function optimally, right, at a cellular level. And so when we have this really healthy, robust, diverse microbiome, then we can know that we are optimizing not only our gut health, but everything else, our immune health, right? Our metabolic health. It is really important to understand that these microbes really play a large hand in all of that. And the microbiome goes hand in hand with what we call our gut lining, or even better yet, sort of the lymphoid tissue that lies just below that mucosal lining of that gut. And that is sort of like the police station, if you will, of our immune system. And almost two-thirds of our immune system really lies within our gut. So when we're all talking about immune systems and this, that, and the other thing, we're really talking about our gut health. And so when we can understand that we have to care for our gut, just as we have to care for any other part of our body, then we can really kind of wrap our heads around that caring for our gut is caring for our entire health. Because there is this informational superhighway that goes on between our gut and our brain. And yes, our brain communicates to our gut, but believe it or not, most of the communication comes from our gut to our brain. So it's not only a place where we take in our nutrients such as hydration and food and all of those essential things for us to be able to run optimally, but it is where we kind of translate and where we absorb all of this information and we turn it around into optimizing our full cellular functioning.
Yes, it's amazing how we have this world, these living organisms inside of us. And I think for some people, that's going to be brand new news because it's not something you really, I'll say like when going to school, conventional medicine, I don't even think I've ever heard of gut microbiome until, we then went into a deep dive of functional medicine and learned not only what is it, but how important it is. And we have microbiome in other places as well, the mouth, the skin, and whatnot. But specifically, like you were saying, to the gut microbiome, it is so important because it not only affects the health of the gut, but everything else. So essentially, would you say that if someone does not have any gut symptoms, can we then think that they have a healthy gut?
Well, that depends, right? It depends on how they feel in general. Um, we're used to seeing clients and participants who don't feel well. So our sort of pool is of people who may or may not have gut-centric issues, right? Like indigestion, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, things along those lines, heartburn, just sort of not feeling right. And they can identify it to the gut. And so then we can sort of extrapolate and say, this is actually something that is affecting the rest of the body, whereas most people wouldn't understand that. But then you have people who actually don't feel that they have any what we call gut-centric or gut-specific signs and symptoms. So they may not have bloating, they may not have indigestion or erratic bowel movements. If you question a bit more, I bet you something would come up. But even if it didn't, and let's say they had an autoimmune condition, or let's say they had another inflammatory type of condition, maybe even a heart disease or a metabolic disorder such as type 2 diabetes. We know, given straight off the bat, that their gut is not healthy because they have these other conditions, because the gut is so important. And if there is an issue within that gut microbiome or within that gut lining, then that is what leads. That's one of the, that is definitely one of the factors that contributes to developing these other issues. So it's very, very interesting because our population would be people who are seeking relief from something. But yes, there is a subtype of this population. Where are they? We're not sure, who actually feel well and don't have gut issues. And that's a beautiful thing because that's our goal. That's what we're trying to get to. So no, your short answer is you don't have to have gut symptoms to have a gut issue, if that makes sense. If you have other issues, we know that there's likely an issue within your gut.
Absolutely. I feel like I read something not that long ago about, for example, endometriosis, where they noticed that there was some gut microbes that's supposed to be in your gut were actually within the pelvic cavity and the pelvic fluid. And it's like, well, if those bacteria belong in the gut, how did they get to the pelvic cavity, right?
Yeah.
How did they get there? So it's what we call leaky gut. Do you want to talk a little bit about leaky gut? What does that mean? What is that?
Yeah, leaky gut is fascinating. Leaky gut. So when we think about the gut lining and we think about the mucosal surface of this, of our gut, right, which again begins at the mouth all the way down through the anus, this gut lining is, she be little, but she be mighty in the sense that it is, a formidable kind of lining of mucosal, all different types of cells, mucus lining, and it is sort of like a police station in the sense that it's semi-permeable, right? So you want it to allow in nutrients and hydration. So it's going to allow in the water that you drink and the healthy foods, hopefully, that you're taking in. And then just below that, there's like a lining, a 1 cell layer thick lining, right? And so that's actually kind of like the border, right? And just below that sits this lymphoid tissue, or this gut associated lymphoid tissue. And this is sort of like the person in charge, if you will, of the immune system, at least this gateway. And so this is the place where it says, okay, that's some really nicely chewed broccoli. Let's wave him in. Everything looks good. That's some beautiful water you drank there, Laura. Let's wave that in. And when it's nice and healthy, and it's full of the nutrients it needs, and it's getting nourished by the microbes that are sitting on top, right? There's not necessarily microbes within the lymphoid tissue, but the microbes are sending really good messages down. Then it's able to do what it needs to do and keep out what it needs to keep out. So it might see a pathogen coming down, it might see something else, or a parasite, a pathogen that shouldn't be there. And if it's healthy, it says, oh no, you stay on the other side of the fence, and you kind of, keep on going until you find your way out, right? Till you find the exit. But what happens is, when we live a sort of modern day life, or a standard American lifestyle, if you will, full of stress, full of overscheduling, full of these low level kind of chronic infections, because our immune systems get dysregulated by the stress, by genetics. When we're eating this standard American diet, which is just so processed, and just, you've got to really dig, and you really can't even find a nutrient really in a lot of the foods that the average American eats in a day. Gone are the days where, you were eating like a protein and vegetable. It really is all about the convenience now. And over the years, right, and depending upon your genetics and your fortitude, that kind of assault starts to make things go askew and awry, right? And then you've also got some medications that play in there, right? That can also help to wear down this gut lining. Think about it like Legos. When you've seen a Lego set that's been well built, the Legos are put together really nicely, and they're tight, and nothing really can get between. And that's why they're able, that fence is able to say, nope, you can come in, Mr. Broccoli, but you stay out, Mr. Parasite, or something along those lines. But when it starts to get worn down, just really due to a lot of lifestyle stuff, those Legos get loose like this. And so it leaves this breach in between. And it doesn't have to be very big, but a lot of things can slip through that shouldn't slip through. And guess what that does? That provokes our immune system even more. And so you're now not only dealing with the, parasites and pathogens slipping through, but because you were eating your processed food, or even your broccoli that you had once that week, and you were eating it really quickly, it slips through, and the immune system doesn't see it as a nutrient source. It sees it as a foreign invader, right? So there's really no difference almost between that parasite and that partially chewed broccoli. And so it starts to set this immune cascade off, and it starts to make your body react with inflammation, react with all sorts of different cytokines, or sort of like these immune cells that are there to kind of like help you. So your body's always doing what it needs to do in order to help you maintain balance, but it doesn't really have to fear the partially chewed broccoli. But because this gut lining is tired and overworked, it gets not confused, that's the wrong word, it gets tired, and it just starts to kind of let its guard down. So we never think about enhanced intestinal permeability or leaky gut. But the fact of the matter is, it's a very common occurrence. And I'd say that more people have it than realize. And it's often a very big contributor to many, many illnesses and disease processes. So we have to keep in mind that we need to care for our gut lining, and we need to nourish it and care for our microbiome. But yeah, it's a very big deal.
So would you say that it's a main contributor to autoimmune diseases in particular?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. for sure, because that first level, right? That first level of defense, if you will, which is that gut line, that lymphoid tissue, that specific tissue, is broken down. It's not functioning as well as it should. And when that happens, and you start to have all these different things start coming in, some of which need to be stranger danger, and some of which don't. That partially chewed up broccoli, or that piece of bread that you ate, your body's going to start to react. And when that happens, it starts to make all of these antibodies to what we call antigens, or sort of like things that shouldn't, the body is seeing shouldn't be there. And then there are lots of other dynamics that happen. Molecular mimicry happens, where the body starts to tag these antigens, or what it views as foreign invaders, and the body starts to realize, oh, that bread, that gluten, or that protein, right, that protein gluten, looks an awful lot like that thyroid molecule. So okay, well, we're going to make this bread not so welcome, and that thyroid isn't so welcome either, even though it's ours. We start to actually develop antibodies to our own thyroid, our own organs. It could be any organ, really, or any gland. So this is a very, very big factor in autoimmune disease development, right? You have a leaky gut, you have some genetic type of a mutation for sure. It is a small part, 25 to 30%. Again, that gets turned on usually by our lifestyle. So just because you have the gene doesn't mean you'll develop the autoimmune illness, but it's usually lifestyle. So genetic component, and then you have the leaky gut scenario, again, from our modern lifestyle. So you have an issue there. And then you likely have that dysregulated immune system that's been brewing for quite some time. And that leaky gut has only added to that. So it's just kind of like adding fuel to the fire. And then you have a trigger. And so it's usually, it could be any kind of a trigger. It could be a toxin, an infection. It could be an emotional stressor, right? People don't often realize that, but in autoimmune conditions, emotional stressors are very big triggers. Heavy metal toxicity can be a very big trigger. So it's about getting to the root causes of what is happening, and trying to just peel that onion back and heal those things, including a leaky gut, so that you can just fortify yourself and help your cells really function optimally, and either heal that autoimmune dynamic, or get it so that it is not affecting your everyday activities of daily living. So just kind of rebalancing your body so that you're not responding, right?
Absolutely. So essentially, it truly is, optimal gut health isn't just about optimal digestion. It's really the foundation of overall health and well-being. So now to the fun part. 3 things that the viewers can do starting today to improve the health of their gut, because as you can see, a healthy gut equals a healthy you. But first, we have a gift for you. Just below this video, you'll find a link at 12wellness.com/free resources. And there you will find our guide, 7 Days to a Healthier Gut. It's absolutely free, no strings attached, just below this video. So we welcome you and invite you to go ahead and download that guide. Now, Laura, 3 things for a healthier gut that they can do starting today. What do you got?
I love it. I love these, on the spot 3 things. I want to give you 50, but I'm going to give you 3. I think, the obvious really is about food and nutrition. Since we are accepting into our guts, greater than 70% of sort of like our interfacing with the outside world comes from food. So I would say, ditch the junk food, ditch the processed food, and really aim to start building your nutrition in the form of whole foods, nutrient-dense foods. And what does that mean, right? It's a big buzzword. It just means real food. It doesn't have to be rocket science. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. We want it to be, right? We want to make everything more complicated than it really is. But it's about eating food that's as close to its original source as possible, right? So An example of that might be, fruits and vegetables. An example of that might be a well-sourced protein. So how chicken or beef or fish, and it matters how they were raised. It matters how they were, reared and brought up for sure. What they were fed, it all matters. So I would say that would be the number one thing, and you start that by developing some self-awareness and cultivating self-awareness, right? You have to stop, sit, and listen, and sort of figure out how your body's reacting and sort of what you are doing. So you might not think that your every other day trip to the McDonald's drive-through is affecting your gut health, but it is. And once you start to think about that and then maybe start to observe how you feel, then that think and link is going to make it easier for you to sort of make some changes, right? And so nothing, Rome wasn't built in a day. So it's small incremental changes having to do with nutrition, right? And hydration. Water's always a good idea. I'd say piggybacking off of that would be to ditch the McDonald's, get some more, whole foods, but up that fruit and vegetable intake because fruits, vegetables, even some beans and legumes, let's say chickpeas or lentils that we know are organic or not sprayed with glyphosate. So they're sort of these clean legumes. They are going to deliver a really, really packed, concentrated punch of anti-inflammatory compounds to your gut. So it's going to really help to heal any of that inflammation that's already brewing. So start to experiment. Start to, you might say, well, I've never really had a chickpea or I've never really had lentils. Start, right? So if you start experimenting and you start kind of being invested in the kitchen and saying, okay, I'm going to take an hour to do this, you're going to really surprise yourself in what you can do, right? We've got Google, we've got YouTube, we've got all these wonderful ways that you can kind of begin to experiment and begin to change your diet for the best. And I speak specifically about fruits and vegetables and these chickpeas and lentils because they contain what we call these short chain fatty acids, which are these anti-inflammatory compounds that I'm speaking about that help to keep that microbiome nice and robust and diverse and with really those good bacteria that we want there. And then I would say this is, possibly the most important one, but nervous system regulation. And what I mean by that is being able to cope with stress, right? So much of the stress that we experience is self-inflicted, if you will. We just are living in a society where everybody expects everybody to say yes. There is no limit. You just do, go, go, go. You're just, when do you sleep? When do you have downtime? When do you do any of these things? It's unrealistic. And it's time to kind of say no to that narrative. And it feels scary at first. But if you think about it in the larger scale of healing yourself and feeling good and getting to that joyful, vibrant life that we all deserve, then it becomes easier to sort of self-triage or to triage what it is that you really need to get done and what, you really don't have to kind of put your mind to at that time. And so that is sort of a first part of nervous system regulation is sort of developing and cultivating self-awareness as to sort of triage, what do I need to get done and what don't I? Ask for help, right? We're not, we're social beings. We're meant to be getting help, certainly. And then part of that nervous system regulation is that when we perceive a stressor, right? A stressor for you, Sandrina, might be something very different than the stress response from me. So our perception of stress can be quite different. And that's for a whole host of factors. It could have to do with, any sort of childhood issues you may have had, or even any sort of low-lying chronic infections your body might be dealing with. It all is affecting our nervous system, which at the end of the day is meant to be in a rest, digest, repair state most of the time. But we're not. We're in this sort of fight, flight, kind of go, go, go. And we get kind of stuck in a loop sometimes, and it's almost impossible to turn off. But it is possible to turn off once you start thinking about it. And for some people, they say, oh, yes, I meditate each morning, or I do yoga every morning. And those are fabulous ways of helping to tend and nourish and calm your nervous system. For some people, it's too much. For some people, they just can't even get to that point just yet. And that's okay, because what you can do is you can do intentional breathing. And that is a beautiful way of regulating your nervous system. So what we mean by that, again, not complicated. Don't make it more complicated than it is. It means that you're going to take a nice long inhalation, could be 4 counts, 5 counts, and you're going to take that big, beautiful inhalation where you're filling up your beautiful lungs full of air. And then you're going to exhale through your nose, right? You're going to inhale through your nose. You're going to exhale through your nose for twice as long as you inhaled. And so it's interesting because you may find at the start of that you're not able to exhale for twice as long. And that's only a message to tell you that you are in a bit of that loop, that fight or flight. But if you keep practicing it, you will eventually get that let down, or that kind of like calm down where you're able to kind of exhale for twice as long. And it sends a message to your mind and your nervous system that you're safe and things are okay. Because if it wasn't safe and you weren't okay, you wouldn't be able to do that twice as long exhale. And when you're not able to do it, your body still thinks it's unsafe for whatever reason. It could have been that traffic in the morning. It could be that boss that you don't like working for. It could be very legitimate family issues. All of those things, absolutely. It's not to trivialize any of it, but you do have to start to become a bit more discerning. Was the fact that the Starbucks barista got your name wrong, was that really enough to get you like worked up about stuff? Probably not. So you just have to learn how to kind of find these tools and utilize them. And you can utilize intentional breathing anywhere, anytime, and it's free. Tons of other different exercises that you can do to just help engage that nervous system regulation, which is largely helped by what we call our vagus nerve. And so when we can engage that vagus nerve and help to calm things down, we can do this with like a downward diagonal gaze. And so when we think about it, we can kind of like be at a computer and we can kind of feel ourselves working up. And so we take a break after an hour or so, and we can kind of just sit, take a nice cleansing breath. And as we're gazing forward, we begin to kind of diagonally and downward gaze to each side, right, to the right and the left. And you can hold it for a few seconds on each side and do it a few rounds. And you will begin to see that creates this calm because it's predictable. And it's sort of a downward gaze, right? So the body, when the body is sort of safe, it's able to look downward, right? Because if it wasn't safe, it would be looking upward and it would be looking around and darting. But when you're able to control your ocular movements, then that's sending a signal of safety and calm. We also get that signal of safety from healthy foods, like I mentioned. So those would sort of be 3 that are super important. But then there's, of course, sleep that's very important. But again, these are all sort of practices, and they all sort of begin to layer on or slot in, if you will, as you begin to develop this sort of foundational or pillar improvement to get to getting a healthier gut or a healthier overall being.
Absolutely. Funny you talking about intentional breathing. When I first started practicing intentional breathing, I'd breathe in for 4, hold for 5, and then the intention was to breathe out for 8. I was like done by 4 seconds. It took
Yeah.
some time and practice to get to those 8 seconds. And now it's just, you've noticed the difference between how you were feeling before you started that breathing practice and after. So something like you said, so simple is so powerful.
Yep.
So great information. Three great things. Number one, stop, sit, and listen to what your body is telling you, right? Number two, nutrient dense diet, nutrition, essentially. Ditch the processed food, go for healthy, nutrient food. And then number three, regulating our nervous system, which is indeed something that is huge nowadays, because like you said, we live in a society where we're always in a rush and really not even getting anywhere, which is,
And it's okay to say no.
absolutely. Boundaries
Yes.
are okay. So great talk as always, Laura. We invite you again to download the 7 days to a healthier gut. You will find more tips in that guide. And if you find someone, family member, friend that you think would benefit from this video, we would appreciate it if you share to them. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.